DM Dango here with another review from the DM's Guild. This time we're looking at Sorrow's Ruin. Tieflings, undead, and cultists. Oh my. Sorrow's Ruin by Blaze Wigglesworth. What are you getting here? This is an adventure for first level players. You should be able to complete it within 3 to 5 hours if your party size is between 4 and 6. Any larger and you might complete it quicker, or it might just bog it down. The adventure itself has rules and tables for how big your party size is to figure out, fine-tune the encounters a bit so that they can be more challenging for the larger party sizes. This comes down to basically increasing the number of monsters or even changing some of them up in certain instances. And that's a great thing to see. It's like, well, if you have a party size of 4, you can still run this if you have a party size of 6. It doesn't really matter. The adventure kind of accordion style grows to accommodate. Now, what kind of adventure are you getting? Well, to start with, your players are presented with a town, and then a distressed woman comes in. She's told you that the priest of Ilmater has gone missing, has been kidnapped by brigands, and she needs you to go and save him. She needs you to go to find out what's gone wrong, and she offers you an amount of gold. Very simple adventure as you start out. You go along, you find the priest eventually, depending on what choices you make as to how many brigands you run up against in this fort that they have. But after that, you complete the fort, and the priest tells you more. He says that there is a tiefling woman, Sorrow, a prophet of sorts, who is destined to do something great, although no one is really sure what in this adventure. I should mention that this adventure is going to be part of a larger series of adventures called The Chronicles of Sorrow, all centered around this tiefling woman who is a child of destiny, much like many adventures are. Once you find Sorrow, you find that she's being accosted by cultists who are serving the goddess Lovatar, a goddess of pain and death and destruction. Generally the evil bits. Ilmater is a god of forgiveness and suffering, but the suffering of others onto you, basically. A martyrdom god. After you rescue her, she tells you of her plight, that the place that you find her at is an old temple, and it leads to a realm that goes far beneath. In that realm, anything can happen. It can be desecrated or consecrated to a new god. The problem is that it's an incredibly powerful place and potentially could destroy the town nearby. So you're tasked with going in and sealing up the temple for good. So I've left some things out here deliberately so that there's a little bit of a surprise when you kind of go through this. But essentially the basic form and function of the adventure has been spelled out here. In addition to that, once you complete the adventure gives the party the opportunity to establish a stronghold, a base of some kind. It's the basic keep. And there's not much to it, except there's some interesting things that can happen with it. And I can see where the author is kind of going. They want to get to this point where this town becomes the center of their kind of overarching world. And they lift little hooks to allow for this kind of thing. It'll be interesting to see what's done in the future as well in terms of other adventures. So, what did I like about this adventure? I really like the idea of giving the players temporary bonuses based on their role-playing. For example, in the Or series of Saint Sir Omniara and his guards, a player may make a mighty oath, and as a result of that, gains a small buff, a increase in their abilities. Now, obviously, not every player is a role player, but it's nice to give that bonus for them. You can also additionally just make a roll for it if you understand what it's trying to do. So it's part puzzle, part roleplay opportunity, and I like that combination. It gives a unique idea for players who are, doing things the right way, but not necessarily are comfortable in the role-playing side of things. So it gives bonuses and benefits to both types of players. I also like the dropping of seeds in various areas to say, here's something that might come up in a future adventure that I'm going to be writing. There's a part later on where they pass out rings. And it's nice to see that there's a little nugget of a hint of something that is coming down the line. It's really great to have those kinds of rewards for players that run multiple of these ventures in a sequence. Kind of like if you think about like Marvel movies, where if you've watched a couple of the ones before, they drop little nuggets and hints, but you don't necessarily need to watch all of them to enjoy the movie as by itself. In addition, I think that this adventure would be really good for DMs who are just starting out, who don't want anything overly complicated or too difficult for them to kind of manage. It's a very straightforward, easy to run adventure. There's nothing gonna catch them out or any esoteric or confusing rules that you're looking through the Dungeon Master's Guide to go looking for. Everything in here is pretty much as the module says. There's nothing to go look up, there's nothing to go read. You only really need the monster manual and the player's handbook to run this adventure. And that's always nice to see, especially for beginner DMs. In addition to that, I also like the idea of consequence-based decision making. There are points in the adventure where a player can do one thing or another, or potentially even a third thing. And depending on what they've done, it will make a difference in terms of how difficult or how easy that encounter is, or what happens as a result. It's not just generally a case of, for instance, making a right or wrong decision, but more of a, well, I want this benefit now, it's going to hurt me later kind of decision, which is really nice to see. It gets players thinking about, well, if I do this now, maybe this will actually have, the whole, Telltale Games NPC A will remember this kind of stuff. I like that idea. It's really well done here, and I hope the author continues it going forward. So on to things I didn't like about the adventure. I didn't like the combat. Or more specifically, I didn't like the kind of blandness, vanilla-ness of the adventure's combat. Everything in it feels very by the book, very here's a bandit, here's a cultist, here's an undead. It would have been nice to have one, maybe two unique monsters peppered throughout the adventure. Or maybe a unique, villain for the players to go against. The bandit captain, for instance, would have been a great idea there. Some, slightly charismatic person you can negotiate with. Or maybe the cultist head who has an affinity for whipping and hurting himself. The greatest heroes are defined by their villains, after all, so this one doesn't have one. Also, in addition, there was a great opportunity when they were underneath and in this final temple to introduce some kind of unique Lovatarian villain, but it felt like a wasted opportunity. It just wasn't there. In addition to that, I don't think that the description boxes were necessarily in your face enough for me. I felt like they kind of blended in a bit with the rest of the formatting, and because of that, it got a little hard to kind of separate them out. It would have been nice to kind of bound them and even maybe put some color behind it so that you knew these are the description boxes, these are what you read to your PCs. But that's a minor thing for me, really. Finally, what do I give this adventure, though, given everything I've said before about what I've liked and what I haven't liked and the general content of the adventure? Well, we go back to my perk system. So, let's start with C, combat. Combat here isn't anything exciting. There isn't anything interesting or unique to kind of grab a player's imagination. However, saying that, it's a great adventure for a first-time DM and a first-time group of players who are trying things out, maybe even trying D&D out for the first time. It gives them enough kind of, here's some stuff, here's how the game works and here's how some things work to get them going. It'll be interesting to see what the author does with subsequent adventures. As you get higher level, combat by necessity becomes more interesting. Characters get more powers, enemies get more powers, and it gets more kind of well-rounded in terms of everything happening in terms of the combat. But for this one, I'm going to rate it a 3.5 out of 5. I think there's a lot you can do with combat, even at first level, to make it interesting. Roleplay. What do I think about this? This is tricky because the NPCs that are presented, Sorrow in particular, there's not a lot of roleplay opportunities in the adventure itself. Now, there might be ones coming forward, especially at the conclusion of the adventure. There's some stuff that goes along with that to kind of give you an idea of what this character will be like and how they'll get there, and how they'll kind of go along. but there's not a lot of opportunities to kind of negotiate or change the outcomes via your role-playing until you get underground. Once you get underground, there are multiple opportunities. The 4 tombs each have a roleplay opportunity for you to try and do something, to make some great oath, and that's really cool. I like having roleplay affect mechanics. It's really an interesting idea, and a really great way of doing things. But unfortunately, the other characters, they don't seem to kind of like have that kind of, well, if you roleplay well, this is what might happen. You can't really roleplay with the guards, or at least as written. You can't really roleplay with the townsfolk to get anything else out of them. But they have information for you, but it's just kind of done down to a role or done down to kind of like an idea. It'd be nicer if there was more interesting kind of ways you can manipulate it. Now, and that's not to say that the characters are presented beyond Sarah herself aren't great. They are. The priest I particularly love. I love the idea of a priest out in the middle of the wilderness who is has that strength of conviction to say, no, she is the chosen one. Sorrow is the prophet of legacy, and she will lead us into light and glory, and to be denied by all of his brotherhood until you bring him the missive that says, you are vindicated. She is the prophet. I like that kind of vindication. It can lead to some great character growth, and for the characters to be providing that in a sort of a way is really nice. A really good way of kind of giving players like stake in the game, as it were. So for me, the role play is a 4 out of 5. It's not perfect, but the stuff that it does well is really, really good. The tomb is a stroke of genius on its own. Well done. Exploration. Exploration for this one, because it is a linear story, there's not a whole lot of like wiggle room in this kind of aspect. However, saying that, there are choices early on that have consequences and change the outcome of certain other things. It doesn't change the outcome of the final story, but that's okay. There are certain elements of stories that basically, there are paths that do kind of, you run along a line, and then you branch, and then you come back, and you branch, and you come back. And that's a cool way of doing a story, because it means that every player's choice feels like it has impact. You could, for instance, let Sorrow get kidnapped, and then you'd have to go rescue her. You could, for instance, wait to go get the priest, and it might have an impact on the battle at the fort. It's nice to see that kind of choice being impacted. And for that, I really can't fault it, and I really give it a great thing. However, in terms of actual exploration of places to go and experience, there's some really unique stuff underground in terms of the final area. And that last bit, the fort, where you can go explore and look around and have like a play in that area. That's a really great addition to this, and it should be lauded. So for exploration, I'm going to give it a 5. Polish. This one's trickier. The maps in it are great. They're really well done. The art style and everything in it, it kind of gives it a nice, really good polished feel. The only thing I might suggest is there's some points where, you have a letter or you have a character that you want to have like really front and center. It would have been nice to have handouts as part of that, just to it's like, here's something really cool I can do. Because I've seen it done in other modules now, where they've gone, well, there's a letter for this person. Well, I can just write it out in text. Why not provide a handout for them? In addition to that, the map files aren't separate on this guy. And that is always a killer for me. And I always take a point off for it, so I have to take one off here. Everything else, though, is kind of minor. Not having that letter, fine. Not having the handouts for the characters, fine. So I'm going to give it a 4 here. So, my final score. So for P, we've got a 4. For exploration, we've got a 5. For roleplay, we've got a 4. And for combat, we've got a 3. So that gives you 7, 11, 16. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. So 4 out of 5. A really great score for a really great little starter adventure, but not for more experienced players. I think for a new DM and a new set of players, this is a great little adventure. Thank you for watching. Please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. And if you are going to purchase a Sorrow's Ruin, please use my affiliate code. It does help me out, sends me a little bit of money. Doesn't cost you a thing to use that link. It's just a way of kind of sending me like a little bit so that I can, purchase more modules and do more reviews. And thank you. Peace out.